What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Pack-A-Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. It is Packers game day, Packers Bengals noon kickoff. Should be a ton of fun. I'm really looking forward to this game. I'm really looking forward to seeing Joe Burrow and this, all of a sudden, really interesting Bengals offense go up against this Packers defense that's missing Jair Alexander and Zadarius Smith. Maybe those things I'm not looking forward quite as much to, but should be an entertaining game nonetheless. I will get to my preview and predictions in just a moment, but before we get there, I have a couple things we need to go over. If you listened yesterday, we hit on a lot of these potential moves that Green Bay made on Saturday. Equanimous St. Brown and Ben Braden were activated to the active roster. Jair Alexander goes to IR, and then Tyler Lancaster is reinstated from the COVID list. I mentioned that if he in fact did, test negative for the second straight day, he would have the ability to be activated, and that's apparently what happened. He is active and ready to go for game day. The Jair injury, as we talked about yesterday, not super surprising that they would sit him down for at least a few weeks, and then really with MVS being out, EQ made a ton of sense. They protected him. And then with Dennis Kelly as well as Elton Jenkins both being on the injured list, Ben Braden made some sense as well. Now, I've seen some hypothesizing as to what this means, with Ben Braden being activated. Does that mean Elton Jenkins is out this week? It could. It certainly could, but it could just mean that Dennis Kelly's out too, right? Because even if Jenkins is ready to go and Kelly is not, they probably want that extra guy up and ready to go. So we'll see what that means. And I think the inactives are certainly still going to be worth keeping an eye on. But I don't think that just because Ben Braden is active, that necessarily means that Elton Jenkins won't be. Again, huge piece of this to kind of keep an eye on as inactives get released around 10:30 Central Time. But as of right now, as I'm recording this, we don't know if Elton will play or not. Even if he does play, it doesn't mean that he will start. He could be an emergency offensive lineman as well. I usually don't like when teams do that. If he's not ready to start, just sit him down. Don't put him in that situation. But we've seen teams do that sort of thing in the past. Also, it was announced that it's likely that Joe Mixon will play in some capacity. So it doesn't sound like he's going to be a full go, but even them getting Joe Mixon for some, plays and in some capacity is a big win for this Bengals offense. So another key piece to this game that we now know a little bit more of, that Mixon will seemingly play in this game. Let's go through, however, the keys to this game, as I do every single week. I've got 12. We'll kind of go through them rapid fire as usual. Number one, and I think this is for Green Bay, they have to attack the interior of that Bengals offensive line. All right, Quentin Spain, Trey Hopkins, Jackson Carman, even those three in and of themselves, not super intimidating. That's an opportunity for Kenny Clark, maybe Rashawn Gary rushing over the middle. Maybe you're doing some twists and stunts. Maybe Kingsley Keke can have a couple other nice plays. That's an area where Green Bay has to attack and has to win. You want to get Joe Burrow getting off of his spots, trying to be a little bit more superhero-ish, trying to maybe force some throws into coverage. And if you can do that, you can get your hands on some footballs. We've seen Burrow make some mistakes, some careless mistakes with the football. So that is a huge opportunity. Now, Trey Hopkins, remember, is questionable and may not play in this game. And if he's out, likely Trey Hill moves in, which is another rookie 6th round pick on the interior of that offensive line. Two rookies playing next to each other. Sounds familiar, I guess, but that is an opportunity for Green Bay to take advantage of. And I think that's a matchup that Green Bay really needs to win, especially with their defensive backs, which we're going to get to in a second, having a lot of trouble. And actually, let's just jump right into that as the number two key. The defensive backs matching up with these wide receivers, whether it be Jamar Chase or T. Higgins or Boyd in the slot. Like, these are three very talented wide receivers. No Jair Alexander. Kevin King's playing for the first time in a few weeks. Those are going to be things to keep an eye on. You've got Eric Stokes, who has kind of his ups and downs. Chandon Sullivan, also hit and miss at times. So this is a really big matchup in this game. And these Green Bay corners, especially Kevin King. Let's touch on Kevin King for a second, because as much as Kevin King has struggled at times, his usual season, if we look back over the last 3-4 years, is inconsistency, right? But within that inconsistency, it almost seems to be more almost game by game, where there'll be a handful of games every year where he actually plays really well. And you're like, okay, I like that Kevin King. Like, that Kevin King can be a good football player. And then there's another 5 games where he's just awful. And you're like, oh my goodness, like, get him off the team. And then there's another, 5 games where he's like, okay, again, maybe hit and miss somewhere between the game. And then there's another 2 games, maybe more, where he's usually hurt. So That's the usual Kevin King experience, but that means you still usually get around 5 good games per season. Green Bay really needs that to be these next few games with Jair Alexander out, and especially with these wide receivers that the Bengals have. No Jair, rookie corner, and Eric Stokes. Shannon Sullivan's been up and down. If Kevin King could have a nice game, that would go a long way in helping against T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. If Higgins and Chase and Boyd are getting off of coverage against Shandon and Stokes and King, this could be a long day for the Packers defense. So those corners absolutely have to step up. Number 3, this is one I've gone over before, but it's an all gas, no break mentality again for Green Bay. If I'm Green Bay, I'm going into this game thinking I need to score at least 31, 35, maybe even 38 points, if not more in this game. I'm going to expect that Cincinnati's going to put up some points on that Packers defense. Pedal to the metal, go full throttle, and put up some points on this Bengals defense. I think the corners can be had a little bit. I know Awuzie has been playing better, but I think you can still attack this defensive backfield. So I want to see points for Green Bay. I don't necessarily, I want to see some explosive plays. Bring out the full arsenal. Show us what you got on offense. I want to see some points by Green Bay, and I think they're going to need to really kind of stay on pace with Cincinnati's offense. It seems crazy to say the Cincinnati's offense, who has the ability to put up some points. We haven't said that in years, but it's absolutely true this week. Number 4, I would love to see some classic Aaron Rodgers free plays this week. Usually where he really can get teams is on unscouted opponents. Now, Pittsburgh was very well versed and prepared with Mike Tomlin, but and really every team is these days. And I think it's going to be a pretty big crowd in Cincinnati. But if there's going to be points in time in that game where the Cincinnati Bengals crowd isn't going to be quite as loud, can Aaron Rodgers get a couple of those big plays, and can you get some shot plays? Think back to Denver last year where they were able to get a big shot play down the field. I believe it was to MVS. Like, again, those teams that don't face Rodgers often can sometimes be a bit more susceptible. They didn't get Pittsburgh. I would love to see Rodgers take advantage of Cincinnati and the Bengals and maybe get a big shot play down the field off of a free play. Number 5 is handle the bizarre. In these inter-conference games, unscouted opponents or unfamiliar opponents, especially on the road, weird things just tend to happen, whether it's blocked punts or punt returns for touchdowns, bizarro pick sixes. Like, these are always made for the bizarre. And I think Green Bay is going to have to probably deal with a couple fluky plays that just go in the Bengals' favor. How do you deal with those? How do you respond to those? Or can you avoid them altogether? We've seen Green Bay have some fluky things happen in Cincinnati in years past. You can't have that happen this week. Green Bay needs to come away with a win. And if they can handle some of those bizarre, unscouted, whatever it may be, plays that usually happen in these weird interdivisional or interconference matchups, I think Green Bay is going to be in a good spot if they can handle that. Number 6 is controlling DJ Reader, or maybe more importantly, making sure that DJ Reader doesn't control you on the interior of that line. DJ Reader has the ability to completely clog the center of your offense. And if you want to run inside, whether it be with Dylan, whether it be with Aaron Jones, DJ Reader can disrupt everything. And we already know that Josh Myers isn't playing, so it's probably going to be, I think it's going to be Lucas Patrick. It could be an Elton Jenkins as well. But either way, you're having a new center who hasn't played with, Green Bay this season so far at center. So that's going to be a matchup that you're going to want to watch. It could be actually a strong argument as to maybe why you would want Elton in that spot. Like I said, I expect it to be Lucas, but we shall see. But either way, you can't let DJ Reader kind of control the game and basically eliminate your inside run game. If that happens and you get predictable and just being able to run outside zone, then it makes things much easier for the Bengals defense. So in some capacity, you got to make sure that DJ Reader just doesn't wreck the interior of your offensive line and make things completely clogged trying to run inside. Next is beware of Jesse Bates. And for those who are maybe a little bit more casual, usually not people who are turning into a 365-day-a-year podcast, but if you're not familiar with Jesse Bates, he is arguably the best safety in all of football. He is a phenomenal football player, rangy, great ball skills, can cover, can do just about everything at that position. You don't want him making those big splash plays. Now, they just went against Minkah Fitzpatrick, so familiar with that playmaking style safety, but you don't want to give him the opportunity to get his hands on the ball. Minkah actually had one. Rodgers forced a pass into Randall Cobb last week. Minkah had the opportunity to pick it off. He didn't. That was one of the big game-changing moments in that game. If you give the same thing to Jesse Bates, there's a good opportunity he will pick that off, and obviously you want to avoid that at all costs. Number 8, would love to see an explosive run from Green Bay in this game. It's really avoided them so far. A.J. Dillon had a little over 20-yard run this past week, but you would love to see a 40, 50-yard run, hopefully housing it, taking it for a touchdown. We know Jones has the ability to do that. It's avoided them so far. They're going to have, potentially Elton Jenkins back this week, maybe a veteran at center, maybe in Lucas Patrick. There's a couple different ways they could go, but you really want to see them try to get that explosive run game going. It's avoided them so far, and this would be a good game and a good week to start getting that moving in the right direction. Number 9, simple but important, is tackling. And again, when you have this sort of playmaking offense by Cincinnati, whether it's Joe Burrow's escapability, Joe Mixon, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase, you just can't have missed tackles in the open field. And, Devondre Campbell and Chris Barnes and Adrian Amos and all these guys have been so good all season. We saw a couple from Eric Stokes last week where he's missed some tackles. We've seen a couple from Darnell Savage this season. It's just going to be really important that you are wrapping up, whether it's special teams or on defense, and not allowing that extra yardage. You're down guys. You're down Za'Darius. You're down Jair. You're down your playmakers. So you want to make sure that the Bengals are earning every yard. And if they complete a 3-yard pass and you allow it to go for 15, 20 yards because you didn't make that tackle, those are things that are going to make your day that much harder. So simple, but effective and important. Make sure you are tackling and doing a great job of wrapping up in this game. Number 10 is Allen Lazard and Robert Tonyan. We've seen, MVS is out last week, right? They go to Randall Cobb in this situation. They're going to take Devontae Adams away in those third down situations. DJ Reader could be clogging things up on the interior of the defensive line. That means that somebody else is going to have to step up. I'm going to feel like they're going to spend a little extra time on Cobb this week. He may not have those same opportunities. It's time for Robert Tonyan and Allen Lazard to get going. I don't think either have played poorly by any means, but they're going to need to have a big game to step up because they're going to take away Adams. They're going to try to take away Jones. No MVS. They're going to keep an extra eye on Randall Cobb. You can't do all of that, simultaneously, but you get my point. Allen Lazard, Robert Tonyan are going to need to be those X factors that step up, make an impact in this game, convert some third downs, maybe convert a couple touchdowns in the red zone. That would be huge for this Packers offense. Number 11 is don't let your foot off the gas on the offensive line, and specifically if Yash has to start again at left tackle, right? I can see a situation where you've got Yash at left tackle, you've had the rookies at right guard and center, you've had to mix and match a variety of different spots. And against San Francisco, you get the ball out of your hands quick. Against Pittsburgh, it was good protection, but they also did some chipping and some helping, some things like that. I can see a world where you're like, listen, we just got by Nick Bosa and Eric Armstead and Dee Ford and, Javon Kinlaw on that line. We got by TJ Watt and Cam Hayward in that line. It's just the Bengals now. Like, we don't have to do all these bells and whistles and get rid of the ball quickly. We can just run our offense. Well, if you're thinking that way, Sam Hubbard and Trey Hendrickson can absolutely wreck a game in the exact same way. DJ Reader, we already talked about. This is a good defensive front for the Bengals, and if you don't take them seriously, they will hurt you. So if Yash is starting and you have to do some of those same things with chipping and helping and getting rid of the ball quickly, then do so and don't get caught in the trap of feeling like, all right, we did well the last couple of weeks. We don't have to do those same things now against the Bengals. You probably do, and you probably should. Now, again, if Elton's out there at left tackle, you probably have a bit more flexibility and leeway to maybe run your offense to its fullest extent, but I would rather have you start a little bit cautious and give those guys some help to begin with and maybe take the reins off as the game goes on, but definitely don't take your foot off the brake against those edge rushers in Cincinnati. They are very talented in their own right. And then last but not least, number 12, stay multiple in your formations. We've seen Green Bay get a bit predictable at times, a lot of 11 personnel, a lot of empty personnel. All of that's fine, but you want to mix and match some double tight end sets, some H-back stuff. Like all that creativity that Matt LaFleur, the jet sweeps, the motions, the orbits, all of it, right? You want this offense as diverse as possible, mixing it up against a team that's not familiar with you. And the more Green Bay can do that, the better off they're going to be. If you see Green Bay having to go a lot of 11 and empty, personnel packages, Cincinnati's, at an advantage in those situations because Green Bay becomes much, much more predictable, and you never want to become predictable on offense. So the more multiple and diverse they can stay, certainly the better off for Green Bay. Those are my keys to the game. As far as my prediction goes, some of you saw it online earlier this week from me doing Green Bay Nation on WFRV in Green Bay. I did pick the Bengals. I do want to quickly say this. Predictions are the stupidest thing in the world. And it's so funny to me always when I make a pick, good, bad, ugly, and different. And either people want to call me out for it after, or even like when I first pick it, like, you picked the Bengals? What? Like, I have no idea. You have no idea. None of the pregame guys have any idea. Vegas probably has some idea because they always seem to have some idea. But yeah, Green Bay's favored in this game. They probably should be. It's a little bit of a scary game. I think with no Jair, with no Zadarius Smith, I think this defense is in a tough spot. The pressure hasn't totally been there. I know Gary played better last week. I know Kenny Clark's playing well. But if they don't get pressure, this is a Bengals offense that can do a lot of damage. And I think, all of these offensive line changes on the road, tough environment. This is a big game. The crowd in Cincinnati is going to be jacked for this. They actually have a sellout this week. So I'm sure there's going to be plenty of Packer fans there, but it's always a weird game in Cincinnati, and I think this is going to be another version of that. It wouldn't shock me at all, and I can understand expecting Green Bay to come out with a win. I'm going to predict Cincinnati. I hope I'm wrong. I hope you can laugh at me after the fact and say what a stupid pick that was. That's great, but again, predictions don't matter. I don't care. I don't spend a ton of time digging in because there's, you just can't predict what's going to happen. Injuries and everything else, but I'm going to say Cincinnati in this one. Like I said, I hope I'm wrong. Hope you can make fun of me after, and then we can move on next week with the Green Bay Packers hopefully being 4-1, taking on the Chicago Bears. I will be right back here tomorrow with, I believe, Perry Goldstein and Alex Strofe breaking down the game as a post-game show, so make sure to check that out. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, but until next time, and as always, go Pack Go and enjoy the game.